Diane Thompson, 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles, Diane Thompson.
My father and I lived 1,000 miles apart, even when we shared a home. We just never saw eye to eye. He was a country boy, and he was most happy when his hands were digging in the dirt, planting a garden. I was a city kid. I loved museums filled with Monet's gardens. One day I said to my dad, I'm thinking about moving to New York City. He just had one thing to say. Well, now I know how you are gonna get yourself killed. I didn't want to live my life in fear, so I made the decision right then I would move. My father was a World War II veteran, and he did what a lot of soldiers did when they came home from war. He got married. Only it wasn't a very good fit. You see, they didn't know each other very well, and they were miserable. I was so afraid of making that mistake that I dated a man for 14 years. And when I told my dad I was engaged, he just had one thing to say. Do you know this boy? Suddenly, I was not so sure. But I asked him, Dad, would you fly 1,000 miles to come to my wedding? He thought for just a moment before he said, no, I'll just catch you next time. Implying, of course, the marriage wouldn't last, and so why bother? But we both knew he was afraid to fly. My father grew up in the 1920s in Montgomery, Alabama. Now, this was a time and a place where people were deeply prejudiced, and so was he. I was afraid of continuing that legacy. When my daughter turned 6, I was faced with a decision. I could send her to a brand new school in a wealthy neighborhood with kids who looked exactly like her. Or I could go out of my way to a school that catered to an immigrant community. There were 26 languages spoken in this school and little girls who wore hijabs. The day I made that decision, I stood on the playground. I looked at this beautiful rainbow of faces, which triggered the Southern accent in my head. And I thought, Diana, your daddy is going to kill you. And I left her there. But I was still afraid of making the right decision for the wrong reasons, or the wrong decision for the right reasons. My father was 1,000 miles away early one Sunday morning when suddenly I realized it was Father's Day, and I felt obligated to call my dad. And then I felt guilty for feeling obligated. And then I felt resentful for feeling guilty for feeling obligated. But I picked up the phone to just get it over with, and the call went like this. Hi, Dad. Whoa, howdy, you called your papa. Dad, how are you? Oh, pretty good, but it's been raining. And he proceeded to tell me all about the weather. You see, my father was the weatherman. Only he spoke about the weather in past tense. And this happened every time I called, and every time I wondered, why can't we talk about something important? When I heard him say, now it's been raining so much I can't plant my garden. Now don't matter, know how nothing would grow even if I did. The ground, it's just too saturated. I thought, wait a minute. My father is a farmer at heart. To him, the weather is really important. Maybe he's been sharing himself with me all along and I just wasn't listening. So when he was through, I said, Dad, can I call you next Sunday? Why, sure, I will be waiting by the phone. I did. He was. This began my Sunday ritual phone call and weather report. Past tense. Week after week, we talked about the weather and how different it could be as it spanned across 1,000 miles. How different plants needed different climates to grow. And one climate was no better than the other, it was just different. But as he talked about the weather on the outside, it occurred to me, we have our own sort of weather systems that circulate on the inside, driven by the winds of our emotions. The dark clouds of fear, they can fill us up more and more and more until it rains down with thoughts of guilt, resentment, and obligation. It saturates the ground so that nothing can grow, especially the seeds of a relationship. I wondered, could I change the weather inside of me? Could I change the climate between us if I listened? I found the more I listened, the more I cared. The more I cared, the more I understood. He never wanted to be a father. He just didn't know there was any other choice. Realizing that, suddenly the distance between us faded. And there was a moment, one moment, when we both said at exactly the same time, "I love you." And we meant it. It's fitting that the very last time I would speak to my father was on a Father's Day. He died the next day. The last time I would lay eyes on him, I filled his fists with flowers from his garden. They were blue buds from a butterfly bush that we planted together. And they were more beautiful than any flowers I'd ever seen in a Monet painting. Now, whenever I think of making a hard call with someone whom I don't see eye to eye, I check the weather. I look inside to see that the sky is clear and the sun is shining, because that's what it takes to fly 1,000 miles.